Once there were green fields kissed by the sun. Once there were valleys where rivers used to run. Once there were blue skies with white clouds high above. Once they were part of an everlasting love. We were the lovers who strolled through green fields. Green fields are gone now, parched by the sun. Gone from the valleys where rivers used to run. Gone with the cold wind that swept into my heart. Gone with the lovers who let their dreams depart. Where are the green fields that we used to roam? I'll never know what made you run away. How can I keep searching when dark clouds hide the day? I only know there's nothing here for me, and nothing in this wide world's left for me to see. I'll keep on waiting until you return. I'll keep on waiting until the broken wings and learn to fly again and learn to live so free. And when we hear the voices sing, the book of love will open up and let us in. So take these broken wings. Baby, I think tonight we can take what was wrong and make it right. Baby, it's all I know, that you are half of the flesh and blood that makes me whole. So take these broken wings and learn to fly again and learn to live so free. And when we hear the voices sing, the book of love will open up and let us in. So take these broken wings. Baby, I think tonight we can take what was wrong and make it right. Baby, it's all I know, that you're half of the flesh and blood that makes me whole. So take these broken wings and learn to fly again, learn to live so free. And when we hear the voices sing, the book of love will open up and let us in. So take these broken wings and learn to fly again, learn to live so free. And when we hear the voices sing, the book of love will open up and let us in.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please now take your seats in the auditorium? Would you please now switch off your mobile phones? The session is about to begin. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Portillo, and I have the great pleasure to be your moderator during this opening plenary session and during the short awards ceremony that will follow it. Could I give a hearty welcome to all the ministers who have joined us here today from all over the world. It's very good of you to give up time to be with us. May I thank all the delegates who are here today. Welcome to Leipzig. I'm hoping that while you're in Leipzig, you might have an opportunity for a little sightseeing. Could I recommend, for example, the St. Thomas's Church, where Johann Sebastian Bach is buried, having spent the last 27 years of his life as the cantor at the church. And he was also responsible for the music in St. Nicholas's Church. The congregation at St. Nicholas's Church that used to attend prayer meetings in September 1989 got into the habit of refusing to disperse after the service and would gather outside. By the 9th of October, this peaceful demonstration had grown into a crowd of 70,000 people in Leipzig, making a silent protest, one of the key events that led to the fall of the Berlin Wall and the unification of Germany, one of the most important recent events in European history. Or while you're here, you might want to go to the Porsche factory. And in that spotlessly clean environment, you'll see Porsche Cayennes heading off the production line, many of them labeled China, heading to affluent buyers in China in the market for luxury cars. Our changing world. During the course of our discussions, we're going to see some live illustration. A graphic artist is going to be illustrating maybe some of the points that people are making. You'll be able to see that process going on, and you'll see some of that work then displayed during the course of the rest of the ITF sessions here in Leipzig. So what is this changing world? Well, I've referred to the transfer of wealth between the old centers of wealth in Europe and in North America, moving increasingly towards Southeast Asia. And this is accompanied by changes in population, growths in population, migrations of population, urbanizations of population, a big change in the number of people who will be living in cities, and that throws up challenges for transport. It also throws up challenges for inclusion, for making sure that our societies are cohesive, and maybe transport can play an important part in that. These populations are going to be doing different things in different places. In many developed countries, they're aging very markedly, which throws up challenges for transport. In other places, mainly in developing countries, the populations are characterized by very high proportions of young people. Climate change, of course, is a subject that's been discussed in these sessions for many, many years. Perhaps recently it's been given a new twist. We've got used to the idea that as a result of higher energy prices and different taxation policies, car usage was going down in the United States. But now, with the discovery of gas from fracking, energy prices have taken a dive in the United States. The American economy is reviving. Perhaps then we should expect that American citizens will go back to driving more and driving bigger cars, a reversal of recent trends. And then, of course, there's the issue of digitalization, which in the context of transport in particular means that people are able to make better informed transport decisions pretty much instantaneously. We're going to start our plenary session with 3 sets of remarks from the podium, followed by a panel discussion. It is my very great pleasure indeed to ask first to the podium, representing the presidency of the ITF, representing France, the Secretary of State for Transport, Maritime Affairs and Fisheries. Also, by the way, he's been the mayor of Boulogne-sur-Mer since November 2002. Will you please welcome Frédéric Cuvillier.
Mesdames, Messieurs les ministres, chers collègues, Monsieur le Secrétaire général, Mesdames, Messieurs les Ladies and gentlemen, friends, first of all, I would like to say welcome. I would like to welcome you to this forum, to this International Transport Forum 2014. I would like to say that I'm very happy to be here in Leipzig. I hope that the mayor of Leipzig can hear how satisfied I am, because I would like to particularly welcome my colleague Alexander Dobrindt, who has come here as a representative of the host country, and he's a very important person here. Every year, dear Alexander, I've been received very warmly here, making it possible for me to do cultural things and to work at the same time. There are always very enriching meetings here. I would like to thank the Czech government as well for their presidency in the previous year. You have come up with a program for our meeting which is particularly important. This is a very challenging topic, namely a transport system in a changing world. In a few days' time, we will try and take up those challenges, to meet those challenges. The inspiration from Leipzig will help us, but it will not be so easy. However, we have to face up to those necessities. We have to do this in general. We have to get an overview. We have to do it together and with a view to the future. There are big challenges. One of them is the necessities we all have to face up to, namely to go about those transport challenges in a different way. Our moderator has already said it. Infrastructure changes, vehicles change, the lifestyles change, the kind of way we deal with our means of transport in different countries, that changes as well. And those are challenges for the future. We have to build in different ways, we have to make decisions in different ways, and we have to decide now. There are quite a number of factors of change which are inevitable, we have to face up to inevitably. Not maybe all directly to do with transport, but having an impact on transport. For instance, the swift growth in information and communication technologies, which in a remarkable way have led to changes and are leading to changes, making it possible for users to have a completely different relationship vis-à-vis mobility. Technologies like smartphones, for instance, that will be some true assistance for mobility. There are new technologies we didn't even envisage 10 years ago, and which we now have got used to already. Transport policies and the players in transport have to make good use of those opportunities. And then the flows of merchandise and goods, they are growing as well. Despite the economic problems we have in certain countries and areas, there are challenges which are international and worldwide challenges. For instance, the widening of the Panama Canal, the refurbishment and expansion of other transport networks, which will change the image of transport. Then the challenges to do with maritime routes, the opening of new maritime routes. And there are lots of other questions which come into play. Also, environmental issues are vital. Here we also have a very important responsibility. Larger ships, larger containers, different kinds of vehicles. That opens new opportunities, however, leads to new challenges as well for infrastructure. For instance, maritime traffic makes it possible for 90% of goods to be shipped, and that, of course, has an impact on port infrastructure. A third factor of change, that has already been said, is the development of towns and cities, urban development, changes in urban lifestyles. Those changes and transformations offer huge chances for development. And public transport, we all know how important that is and what that means. We have public transport between cities or in cities. This is also about development of networks, energy systems, digital challenges. All that has become our day-to-day life already in our urban lives. And of course, in such a presentation, of course, I have to mention the most crucial issue, namely climate change. As far as transport is concerned, there are particular challenges to do with the fact that we emit less, but we have to adapt in other ways as well. France, at the end of this year, 2014, will host the climate conference. We will be the host country for this worldwide meeting. This will be about climate change, and I do hope that there will be a global agreement as a result of that. It will be about the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and emissions full stop. So lots of challenges. We've only got a few hours, we've only got a few days to deal with all those issues, and we want to deal with all the problems in the world to do with traffic. We want to have a look at our policies, we have to make speedier progress, and at the same time we want to have a look how innovation, creativity and exchanges can develop in a better way so that we can plan things in our generation and can prepare for new practices in the future. You may be tempted to revolutionize the world, to reinvent the wheel. This is not what this is all about. Of course, this could be an important point in our program, but maybe let's not be too modest, and we should think about our activities. Our thoughts, our ideas, our responsibilities are key. How can we make sure that we coordinate government activities in a better way? How can we involve all players, for instance, intermodal transport? And I know how difficult it is. There are declarations about cargo traffic on the rails. I know how difficult it is to get all players round a table. And of course, we have to invest more in vehicle technology. And one of the main challenges, of course, is to come up to new tasks, to come up to new transport requirements. This is a job, this is a calling to organize transport, to do research in the demand for transport. What kind of demand? How can we organize it? How can we account for it? We need patience. We need to be persistent. And I would like to thank you for the opportunity that we can go about those issues from this rostrum. Of course, all those changes lead to risks as well. Social risks, for instance. I do think that transport has to be linked to a social dimension. We have to put transport at the center of our attention. Transport has to be seen as part and parcel of our lives so that we develop our resources further. Employment, developments in healthcare. We have to make it possible for people to come together, to form relationships, and means of transport are means of communication at the same time. We also have to see that we have other means of communication, but they can never replace personal meetings, one-on-one meetings. And here, transport systems can help us, so we have to develop our policies accordingly. This is one of the challenges, to account for present developments and at the same time not to endanger social cohesion, and not just in urban areas. Personal relationships among people are key. Transport solutions have to be a vector, making a contribution to be able to share things, to get to know each other better, and to have a better access for more people, better access to new jobs, to new places. And all that by making good use of new offers. Means of transport are the expression of the dignity of a country. And here we have to come up to those requirements. When it is about creating clean and smart means of transport, we have to be vigilant, as training and qualification is key. And that must not be paid for by a social invoice, so to speak, limiting our opportunities. We have to make sure that means of transport remain affordable for most people. So we need skills, we need training, dialogue and cooperation. All that needs to be at the basis of this. There are technical challenges as well, which need decision makers who are skilled enough to do that. We have to create bridges between scientific research and actual application in practice. We know that from other fields of life as well. We have to be pragmatic at the same time. In this way, we have to make sure that we see what is going on in other countries, be it private or public initiatives, and we have to develop our own systems. Cooperation between private and government players, that is one tool, and we can make progress by doing this. And let me reiterate again, the president of this forum considers this issue vital as well. I would like to thank all colleagues. I would like to thank you. In different countries, there have been dramatic situations. In some instances, I have experienced such dramatic situations myself as well, and I know how difficult sometimes it is to cope with those situations. Every minister will have encountered situations like that. And on behalf of the International Transport Forum, I would like to express my sympathy vis-à-vis the ministers and countries which were affected by natural disaster in recent times. But we should go on cooperating. Maybe that is an additional point of pressure. And I think this forum, the ITF, will make one contribution towards those aspirations. Thank you very much.
Very much indeed for your welcome on behalf of the French presidency, and for your clear call for us to respond to our consciences, and for your clear call for us to cooperate. Our next speaker is representing Germany. He has been a member of the Bundestag since 2002, but now as a minister in the federal government, he has the interesting combination of responsibilities of being the federal minister of transport and of digital infrastructure, which I think goes very much to the heart of one of the themes of our discussions today. It is with great pleasure that I welcome to the stage Mr. Alexander Dobrindt.
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, President, colleagues and friends, Mr. Cuvier, Secretary General, Professor Diegasch, I'm very happy to be able to welcome you. Welcome to the opening of our International Transport Forum. It is now for the 7th time that we hold the ITF in Leipzig in Germany. This has almost become a tradition, and I'm very happy that we will be able to extend that into the future. We like being a host to the International Transport Forum, and we hope that you will like it here. If there are any complaints, please turn to the Secretary General. If there is praise, turn to me, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, there are big challenges in the field of mobility. For the International Transport Forum, we have lots of interesting issues on the table. Dear Frederick, by taking on the presidency, you have done the spade work, coordinating issues to prepare this meeting together with the Secretary General, and I can say that you have succeeded in organizing a top-notch meeting with lots of top-drawer issues. This year we have a great title, Transport in a Changing World. This shows how close we are to processes in society which not just have an impact on transport, but transport has an impact on those issues as well. The kind of dynamism, the dynamics you described in your speech are very important because it shows that the mega trends in society to do with mobility and transport have a particular impact. Climate change, demographic change, digitalization, all that is reflected in mobility. Hence the title, Transport for a Changing World, is an excellent description of the challenges which are necessary to be mastered. Digitalization suffuses everything. New technologies change mobility. Hence, I like to say that mobility nowadays is not a 100% technical issue anymore, not a purely technical issue, which is about shipping goods or getting people from A to B. But this is an issue which is important in society at large. And we are well advised to define it as a societal issue. As mobility in our countries decides whether there will be value creation. A pyramid of progress nowadays in a society would have to be described as follows: well-being, growth, infrastructure. Infrastructure is at the basis of wealth creation. And over the last couple of weeks, it has been shown by an international McKinsey study, a study looking into regions of wealth in the world, tried to describe them in their development and evolvement. And this study says that the basis of future wealth will be the flows in our society. Flows decide about wealth. They described flows of merchandise and goods, flows of people, and also data flows. Data flows which have an impact on our future development. Hence, there is a triad of our efforts. So our efforts are three-pronged. We have to maintain infrastructure, have to expand infrastructure, and we have to interconnect infrastructure. Those three pillars are important in our modern society, and we need to implement that. Hence, in our discussions, we concentrate on digitalization and digitalization in mobility. Big data is the watchword as a driver for smart transport systems. Yes, it is a big chance. It is the core issue when we mention mobility, transport for a changing world. Hence, I'm very happy that this is part of a big discussion in society, and I'm very happy that we can conduct this discussion here in Leipzig. I look forward to some very intensive 2 days, and I wish you a very good meeting, very successful discussions, and have some fruitful arguments so that mobility as a societal issue for a future society of wealth creation can be implemented. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you, Minister. Thank you in particular for making so clear the connection between well-being, growth, and infrastructure, which I think is an extremely valuable insight. Our next speaker is going to have the shortest introduction because he's extremely well known to all of you, but that doesn't mean that his welcome here is any less warm. It's with great pleasure that I welcome the Secretary General of the ITF, José Villegas, please. Welcome.
Ministers, and in particular Minister Cuvillier, President, Mr. Dobrindt as host, distinguished guests. I hope you enjoy the next few days here in Leipzig at the International Transport Forum's annual summit. This is a gathering of ministers, corporate CEOs, high-level public officials, academics, international organizations, NGOs, representing all modes of transport and their relations to society. We keep growing in the hierarchy of representation and in the numbers. This year, again, more than 10% growth. I am delighted to have so many of you here, and so I give you a warm welcome to all of you. We've heard already that transport must adapt to a changing world. We have demographic change, with urbanization, aging in some societies, and the surge of young population in others. Digitalization with impacts on business, labor, and lifestyle. Climate change, the change of the main energy vectors, which is affecting many modes of transport, and the shifting of economic and political power. If you look at those maps, those are the 10 largest container ports in '89, the previous map, and this is in 2012. Everything has moved east. There's not a single European or North American container port in the top 10 today. But transport has been changing the world for many centuries. And so we might take stock of that for a little while. It was horses since 7th century, more or less, redefined trade, then shipping, then railways with great impact on urban settlements and on trade over long distances. Then road transport, which led to ubiquitous access, spreading cities and a new lifestyle. And then shipping based on containers, and they revolutionized trade. So this is what's been happening in the past. The challenge for our generation is that transport can still change the world, not simply adapt to that. And if you allow me, I would recall that these things that transport has done in the past, it has done by being able to combine innovative and efficient patterns, technologies coming from very different areas, different sorts of engineering, mathematics, physics, but also organizational sciences. And we have to do this again. Let me bring to you some examples that we see forthcoming, which are not among the most quoted ones. And if I'm bringing this to you among those not so quoted is because we have policy choices to make. None of the things I'm going to say is inevitable. They can happen if we take the policy decisions in that direction. The first one is about real-time organized vehicle and ride sharing. And with this, we may define the borders between what we today call individual and collective transport. This will bring massive modal shifts, improvement of quality of mobility, but also a reduction of congestion and of emissions. As we move from ownership to service, this will redefine the role of car in our lives and in society. This will also bring a drastic reduction of the areas needed in our cities for parking, allowing the reconversion for open public spaces, for walking and biking, for buildings in which the functional diversity that is absent in many of our neighborhoods can be restored. Secondly, if we redefine the objective of urban mobility as providing access and not kilometers and speed, we may have a radical change again, because we may be developing more compact, functionally diverse land uses with greater adoption of active modes like biking and walking, and a better quality of life, and again, less emissions and less congestion, and not least important, better social inclusion. It is also bringing drastic improvements in road safety, first by assisted driving and then possibly by autonomous driving. And this will bring many fewer fatalities and injuries, a lot less working days lost, and much less pain in society. Across the world, we still have more than 1.2 million people killed on the road each year. And then we will also have the Internet of Things and the Internet of Vehicles, with optimal matching of unitized goods with logistical chains, improved load factors of vehicles, lower and more reliable delivery times. We will also have condition-aware infrastructure and vehicles. And this probably is a key instrument. All infrastructure will be filled with sensors. A key instrument to solve the problem that all our governments are having of how to make ends meet in maintenance of the road and rail infrastructure. And we will have no mechanical failure without advance warning. And we will have much lower maintenance costs. We will also have much higher system resilience, with a capacity for the quick reconfiguration of networks, of mobility, and of logistical chains. And then, led by automation, we may also have a loss of many jobs in logistics and in transport. And this will be in parallel with similar trends in many other sectors. This will bring a big productivity increase, but aggravated inequality unless we deal with it properly. And it makes no sense to pretend the problem is not there. What we feel is that the scale of change in this domain is such that the traditional programs of social assistance and recycling of labor will not be enough, and the new social deal may well be needed with a radical review of some of the current foundations. It's not too early to start thinking about that. This dimension is something that will come upon us very, very strongly. We believe that the ITF can have a role in this dynamics as a formulator of problems, a coordinator and participant of research programs, a disseminator of results, and bridging those results into policy discussions and recommendations. And as always we do, networking with key partners from research, industry, civil society, and government. So, I thank again the presidency in the name of Ms. Quevillier, the host country, Minister Dobrindt. I want to give a special word of thanks to our sponsors, BMW, Toll Collect, DHL, UND, and DECRA. Their support is very important to help us sustain this level of quality that you have during these days here. We look forward to very dynamic debates, discussions, and a lot of learning from each other, as it always happens. So please join us. The journey is about to start.
Thank you very much indeed, Secretary General, for giving us a stimulating list of thoughts. Vehicle sharing, access, road safety, logistics, condition-aware vehicles, and a new social deal. I'm sure those themes will be with us through the session. I now invite to give a keynote address, the leading authority on the measurement and understanding of inequality picking up from the theme of the Secretary General, in the University of Texas. He's the Lloyd M. Benson Jr. Chair, and he's Professor of Government at the Lyndon B. Johnson School of Public Affairs in the University of Texas in Austin. I'm very pleased to welcome James K. Galbraith.
Mr. Secretaries General, Monsieur le Secrétaire d'État, ministers and delegates, honored guests, thank you for the privilege of speaking here today. As an economist, it is my special, I might even say rare, pleasure to be among practical people, charged as you are with making one of our most basic systems work and with adapting it to a changing world. That transport does work is attested to by the fact that I am here, having spent last night in Barcelona. I wrote that line several days in advance, and not without just a touch of trepidation. Now, what in transport is the essence of practical administration? Plainly, it is the application, even the strict application, of effective standards. This morning, these helped to assure that my plane would fly, that I could breathe comfortably while on board, very usefully that we did not run into anyone else while aloft. Strict and effective standards on these and many other matters preserve trust. They impart confidence. They therefore enable markets to exist and to function and to succeed. Without them, the transport sector, as we know it, would collapse. And we would be back before too long to the first of the slides that we just saw, showing the horse. Nowadays, your task goes far beyond safe and efficient operation. It covers planning, fairness, urban development, the environment. It is essential to a strategy of coping with climate change. It covers green and inclusive growth. In each case, the practical substance concerns standards. What to require, when to require it, how best to enforce the rules, and by what means and mechanisms, including, of course, market mechanisms. Your job, so far as I understand it, is to match what can be done with what should be done. It is to match the goals that can be set with the goals that can be met. It is to marry technical capacity to social purpose. Now, in the spheres that I know a little better, including finance, economic inequality, and yet larger questions of macroeconomic policy, the same practical approach is appropriate, though it is not often present. As in transport, lives are at stake, but the connection is not quite so immediate or so visible. And so an appreciation of the role and necessity of standards is not so clear, and the practical approach does not always prevail. In home mortgage finance in America for over 3 decades, and I was staff economist to the Banking Committee in the House of Representatives in 1980 when legislation was enacted that started the debacle. We in the government, and especially at the Congress, succumbed to those who sought easy gain from weaker standards. There was money to be made in bad mortgages. There was money to be made in rating the bonds created from those mortgages. There was money to be made in selling them all around the world. And in due course, unmanaged risk and even fraud suffused the system. And when the losses were exposed, trust collapsed, evident very clearly in the unwillingness of major financial institutions to lend and provide liquidity to each other. When trust collapsed, the credit system failed. The rise of finance drove the rise of unstable and unsustainable inequality. This was true in the United States, it was true in Europe, and it's true in just about every country that we have, for which we have been computing inequality measures across sectors over the last 20 years. I don't say this as something which is either good or bad. I don't say it to condemn the financial sector, which is obviously an essential part of our economies. This is simply what the evidence shows. And it is no surprise that the inequality peaked when the credit booms did. In 2000 in the United States and worldwide, in 2007, again in the United States with the peak of the mortgage finance boom, and also in such countries as China, where our measures show a peak in inequality in 2008. Rising inequality is like rising blood pressure. It prefigures a crisis. It's a warning sign. It falls after the crisis, but when that happens, it's too late. Can inequality be managed as the transport sector is managed, or as blood pressure can be managed? Of course. And the means, let me suggest, are generally speaking of the same type. There are some who call for extreme measures. In one very influential recent book, drawing on the symbolism to a degree, if not the substance, of Marx, there is a proposal for an annual global tax on the market capitalization of private wealth. Quite an extreme measure. But an extreme measure is a bit like an aggressive medical intervention. It is something which you will avoid if you can. To manage inequality, to control it, I would suggest, requires, for the most part, practical, tested approaches that are like diet and exercise. They are boring, but they are known to work. These include social insurance, minimum wages, collective bargaining, and public goods, including education, health care, and the reasoned control of finance. It is hard, admittedly, to apply and sustain standards such as these in a world of open trade, fractured banking, and even more fractured taxes. It is hard to resist temptation, sloth, sin, and vice. It is hard to do these things, especially in the face of the digital revolution. Mr. Secretary General, you just spoke of it, which saves work and eases life, but also concentrates incomes and wealth, and is bringing, as you said, an end to millions of jobs to which we have become accustomed and on which people have in the past relied. And what that requires is that we use our imaginations to bring millions more jobs into being, to create the jobs and the work that we still have to do when our lives are made easier and safer and better by the application of the new technology. That is what the control of inequality also requires. The largest task that we face together as the OECD and as the countries of the ITF is to sustain and enhance our standard of life. And yet here again, the basic principle applies. Economic development, the condition that distinguishes most countries, represented here, does not consist mainly in exclusive technology, superior education, or big towns. Those can be everywhere. Economic development, let me suggest, consists at a much more basic level in precisely strict and effective standards, competently enacted, fairly applied, and willingly respected for the most part. Anyone who has lived in less favored lands knows this. In the wider world, you have to struggle for simple things: clean water, unpoisoned food, effective drugs, safe housing, paint without lead, appliances that don't catch fire. In the wider world, you have to deal with a culture of defiance and resistance and defeat of standards. It makes life hard. It makes people poor. There is a certain myth, even in our own region, that one can do without, that societies can organize themselves. Europe is a continent of high standards. Here, that myth, I'm afraid, partly as the work product of my own profession, has become embedded in the international institutions and constitutional order, even more than was the case in the United States. And the result, especially since the crisis, has been to bring some of the member states, the weakest members, to a very serious point. Our challenges now include jobs, growth, fairness, the environment, the challenge of climate change, the repair of damage done in the crisis. They are daunting. But in each case, let me suggest the proper first step is a change of ideas. I am the modest co-author of a proposal for Europe. It deals with debt, banking, investment, social solidarity. We call it the modest proposal. Why? Because each step is designed to be possible without changing treaties, charters, or constitutions. What is required, first and foremost, is a change of ideas. As a one-time Marshall Scholar, it makes me proud to be here to quote George Marshall, speaking at Harvard on June 5th, 1947. These were the remarks that would launch the OECD. He said, "The remedy lies in breaking the vicious circle, in restoring the confidence of the European people in the economic future of their own countries and of Europe as a whole. Our policy is not directed against any nation or doctrine, but against hunger, poverty, desperation, and chaos. Its purpose should be the revival of a working economy. And yet the whole world of the future hangs on a proper judgment of things." Now, great though it was, that speech of George Marshall was not the first, but only the second of that era to signal the power of changing ideas. So let me end with a mention of the first. It was delivered in Germany, in Stuttgart, on September 6th, 1946, by another American Secretary of State, James F. Burns. This was the speech of hope. It held out for the first time the prospect of independence, democracy, and economic recovery to a defeated German nation. The speech is quite dry. It deals largely with the then pressing matters of borders, the status of the Ruhr, basic public administration. I won't quote from it. It was the substance that mattered. Soaring passages are hard to find. And yet, in that single speech, by the force of what he said, Secretary Burns on that day buried the Morgenthau Plan. He defeated schemes to pastoralize Germany, to reduce it to penury and poverty for a generation. He ended the danger that Versailles might happen twice. In that speech, Secretary Burns reset the debate. He paved the way for the Marshall Plan, for European recovery, and for the OECD. A change of ideas became a change of history. Now, it is a fact that was not known until recently. In fact, it emerged in 1996, 50 years after that speech, after the Speech of Hope. That speech was written by an economist, a young man at that time, considerably younger than I am today. His name was John Kenneth Galbraith. And so it's really remarkably close to home. Thank you very much for your time and your attention.
Stay on the stage. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed, Professor Galbraith. We've got a moment now for a question or two, maybe from the audience. Can I see anyone from the audience? And I'll get a microphone to you if anybody wants to put their hand up at the moment. In the absence of that, let me ask you, what transport policies can be implemented that reduce social inequality?
Well, I think this is an area in which economists are tempted to assert more expertise than they have, and it's a dangerous thing to do when you're in a room full of actual experts in the area. But having said that, I am an economist, and it seems to me that the clearest answer is one already alluded to, which is that as transportation systems become more efficient, as they become more accessible, as they become closer to, let's say, true public goods and integrated into the life of cities better than they are now, and certainly better than they are in my country, then you will find that they contribute to easing the drain that transportation places on people's incomes, and therefore enables them to enjoy a more equal existence.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the audience for Professor Galbraith? I think we do, right at the back there. Could a microphone go to... remain standing, sir, then they'll see you. Could we hurry that microphone along there, please?
Moderator, Professor Galbraith, a very deep presentation. But has the world come to terms with how to govern over 7 billion people?
A nice, simple question, and it's rising to 9 billion over the next few decades.
The answer to that, of course, is no. But it is a task that lies in front of us. And I have to say that in certain respects, in the areas under the administration of this body, the International Transport Forum, one has a model of an efficient global infrastructure. Now, it obviously can be improved and must be improved, but when you compare it to almost anything else, it really works remarkably well. So perhaps the methods that are employed in this field can be thought of as a template for the problems that continue to exist and will continue to exist in the vast array of other issues of global governance.
Thank you very much. Do I have one other quick question? Yes, I do. It's over there. Could you stand up, please? Or just make it easier for the microphone to reach you. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's say the base of transport is how to come to the start of the transport. If you look at the cities, everything, you will see an enormous amount of people walking around to come somewhere. Where is that in all that you are thinking of in the economy of transport? I'm from the International Federation of Pedestrians.
Lots and lots of movement.
an admirable question to which I confess I do not have an equally elegant answer. But it's clear that the cities of the future will be much more livable if they are designed to permit people to move around compact spaces easily on foot. And it's clear that the cities of the second half of the 20th century, which were increasingly designed to be entered and exited by automobiles, didn't meet that standard. And I know I live in one of them now. It's a perfectly nice place, but the roads are too wide, and there's too much real estate given over to parking garages, and not enough density of, let's say, places that are really meant to be lived in.
Thank you very much. I'd love to go on with the Q&A for longer, but I really dare not because we need to move on to our panel discussion now. So could I hear a big round of applause, please, for our keynote speaker, James K. Galbraith. Thank you, sir. While the chairs are placed on the stage to my right, I'm going to introduce the panel, but I'd like the panelists to wait until the end of the list before they come up, please. New to the stage this afternoon will be Jerry Brownlee. He's the Minister of Transport for New Zealand. He's a Member of Parliament for a district in Christchurch, New Zealand, and following the earthquake disaster in Christchurch, he was the Minister for Canterbury Earthquake Recovery. Also coming to the stage, I'm going to welcome back Alexander Dobrint. New to the stage will be Lisa Raitt. She's the Minister of Transport in Canada. Previously, she was the Minister of Natural Resources, and she's been the Minister of Labour. And interestingly, in her background, she was the President and the Chief Executive Officer of the Toronto Port Authority. I think well known to many of you, I shall be welcoming to the stage Mr. Angel Gurria. He's the Secretary General of OECD. In his past, in his native Mexico, he was both the Minister of Foreign Affairs and at another time, the Minister of Finance and Public Credit. I shall be asking Jean-Marc to come to the stage. He's the President and CEO of Transdev, a major transport operator. For 10 years, from 2004 until 2014, he was the Managing Director of Group Development at RATP, the Parisian Public Transport Organization. And I shall also be asking back Mr. Frédéric Cuvillier, who you know is the Secretary of State for Transport, Maritime Affairs and Fisheries, and representing the French presidency. Will you please give a round of applause to all of those panelists? Would they come and join me in these seats to my right, please? It's very nice to see you. Welcome. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Uncle, you okay? Very good to see you. Alexander, welcome back. Minister, have you found your chair? There we go. It's self-evident that there are 4 panelists from whom we haven't yet heard, and so I'm going to give the opportunity for those 4 to begin our session. I think the order probably doesn't matter very much, but how would it be, Lisa Raitt, if you were to begin by giving us maybe 4 minutes of your views, please? Have we got a microphone? You can have that. You can have that one if you like.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. Merci beaucoup. C'est un honneur pour moi de pouvoir m'adresser à vous en cette séance plénière d'ouverture de sommet. The theme today, which is Transport for a Changing World, really does bring you down some interesting avenues for discussion, and I was very interested with what Professor Galbraith had to say today, and I'd like to follow up a little bit on how do you repair that trust once those standards break down, because I think that'd be an interesting topic to get further into. But I wanted to talk today a little bit about recent developments in transportation and trade, specifically in Canada, and highlight some of the key challenges that we're facing. As many of you know, Canada is a trading nation, and we take great pride in that. So transportation, getting from the market, from the mine, from the farmer's field to the destination is incredibly important for us, and it underlines our economic growth and our long-term prosperity. We move from coast to coast to coast. There are 3 coasts that we utilize. We link Canadians and our manufacturers and importers and exporters to the global trading system. And as global traders, not only do we reap the economic advantages of international trade, we have to always be aware and responsive to global change, because we need to make sure that our network is resilient and it's up to the challenge. So when you take a look at certain trends like manufacturing shift to Asia, the rapid development of global supply chains, in the context of our very aggressive trade agenda, we took very great interest in noting that to make sure our economy benefits from the change, we need to make our transportation system more efficient. So that means not only the physical infrastructure, but also having and maintaining stronger partnerships, both with public and private sectors, not only at home, but also abroad too. So part of our response has been to formalize our relationships with key partners, and we do that through our modern and our ambitious trade agreements. We have concluded free trade agreements with 10 countries in less than 7 years, and we're negotiating with 30 more. There are 2 of note. Last year, the Prime Minister Harper, announced an historic agreement in principle with the European Union, which has been really our most ambitious trade and investment initiative to date. It's broader in scope, it's deeper in ambition than NAFTA was, which predates it by 20 years and has been a great success for Canada. And once implemented, it will cover virtually all sectors and aspects of Canada-EU trade, including the transportation sector. The second trade agreement of note our Prime Minister announced has been an important trade agreement with Korea, and it's our first with an Asian country. South Korea is not only a major economic player and a key market for Canada, it really does serve as a valuable gateway to a dynamic Asia-Pacific region. So we are pursuing an ambitious trade agenda. But we have to make sure that the transportation system is up to the challenge, because we expect and anticipate that our trade volumes will increase, and we need to make sure our Canadian companies can play their part in global supply chains. So many years ago, we developed what's known as a gateway approach. So basically, it's founded on domestic partnerships, but we need to have international engagement and an alignment on transportation policies and regulations, operations, and investments to increase our ability to integrate with a global supply chain and take those opportunities. We work with all levels of government, and we make sure that we work with the private sector as well too. We want strategic investments. We want to make sure that the supply chain supports our trade agenda. And we've made some significant federal investments both in strategic transportation and trade projects, and they have levered total investments that far exceed the original government investment. It's a successful multimodal approach, and what we've done is we've taken a look at the chain in its entirety, and we want to ensure that if there's a bottleneck along the chain, that we attack it aggressively with investment, with regulation, with operational standards to ensure that we get that bottleneck out of the way and that we can have that chain working as best we can and facilitate access to and from Asian and European, North and South American markets. We focus on all modes. We make sure that we engage with all partners along the supply chain as well too. But first and foremost, and mainly because I guess in my portfolio, and since I've come into this portfolio after a tragic derailment in a small community called Lac-Mégantic in Quebec in Canada, our commitment to trade and transportation has to be founded in safety. And while we are very concerned, and we have a great commitment to the environment as well too. We have a great breadth and scope of natural resources. We have oil, we have minerals, agriculture, and forestry products. These are essential to our Canadian economy. But to make sure that traders and markets and Canadians have confidence in the safety of transportation, we have to do a few things. So recently I announced in marine transportation a significant move to strengthen our safety systems for marine tankers. And when we see deficiencies, we will act in order to ensure that the public remains safe. And for an example, in rail, we recently ordered the phase out of certain rail tank cars that do not meet our safety standards. Our focus in Canada is on jobs, on growth, and on long-term prosperity. But that requires a safe, a secure, and an efficient transportation system that is environmentally sustainable at the same time. And I think that the measures we've taken in the past number of years serve to strengthen our transportation and in turn our trade system, which of course makes sure that we have a bright economic future. Je vous remercie de m'avoir donné la chance de parler de ce temps des défis auxquels nous faisons face. I look forward to continuing to share the experience and learn from your international community's best practices throughout the summit. Thank you very much.
Merci. Angel Gurria, would you like to go next? Do you need a microphone?
I think I got one here.
You got one there, great.
Thank you very much. Let me just pick up where James Galbraith left us, which is with the legacies of the crisis and what we have to deal with here. We have many casualties: growth, employment, equity, and trust. And he mentioned them all, and he elaborated a little bit on the trust issue. And we're just coming out and trying to deal with all these four casualties. And, well, not doing so well yet. Growth is about 3.5% world growth, maybe moving to 4% next year. Unemployment, as we speak, is still growing in places like the Eurozone. We got countries with 12%. You know, the US is doing a little better, but 12% average unemployment in the Euro area, 25% for the young. And in Europe, 50% for the young, long-term unemployed, sometimes even more than 50% of the young and long-term unemployed. Equality, or inequality rather, keeps growing. And therefore, as we speak, again, this is still a problem, although nothing like a good crisis, and we had it as good as it comes in terms of the first 3 years of the crisis. Inequality grew more than in the 12 years before that. So the crisis clearly had a dramatic impact in the efforts in order to create more equal societies. And last but not least, because of the low growth, because of the high unemployment, because of the growing inequality, because of the lack of transparency, because the wealthiest don't pay taxes, etc., or because the multinationals don't either, the trust was dramatically destroyed, and that makes it so much more difficult to do anything, because the policies don't stick if people are thick-skinned and don't believe in what we're talking about here. So this gathering is not only extremely timely, but it's very welcome, and particularly in the OECD. We just had our Ministerial Council meeting only last week. We received many leaders there, and this is a perfect complement to deal with the different issues. Let me also say that the theme of transport for a changing world is not only appropriate, I think it is inevitable, given that when you're talking about addressing these many legacies of the crisis, transport actually plays a very a special, I would say, peculiar, unique role. And also in a context in which I like just to mention a few of the complexities that we're seeing today. And this has to do more than with a photo, with a movie of the situation, you know, what's going on as we speak. First, aging was mentioned. José Villegas mentioned aging as an issue which is coloring everything that we're going to be doing going forward. And the split, the shifting wealth phenomenon, which has been on now for a few decades, but which also is looking at the aging as another feature. Many developing and emerging economies have more dynamic demographics, a growing labor force, very critical for growth. Second, we are continuing to urbanize. The urbanization process did not start before the crisis started a long time ago, but 70% of the world's population is expected to live in cities by 2050. Today, more than half of the total population, including in developing countries, lives in cities. So ensuring access to jobs, education, and services for both urban and rural inhabitants is critical. Professor Galbraith and our friend from the Federation of Pedestrians made the point about how do you transform cities so that they are no longer cities for cars, but cities for people. And of course, transport is absolutely critical to move in that direction. And third, we are on a collision course with nature. Any of the solutions, any of the roadmaps that we choose here has to take into consideration that climate change is not just an environmental issue, it is squarely an economic issue, and that we need to move during the second half of this century to zero net emissions from fossil fuel combustion, and we are to be successful in limiting global warming. Now, there are other environmental challenges too. Today, a little later, I'll be launching a report on the health costs of air pollution just from road transport. A very, very dramatic set of numbers, and using figures which are widely available from the World Health Organization, not necessarily proprietary. It is the analysis that is proprietary in terms of where this is leading to. And again, this signals in the direction of changing the way we are doing things today. But the problem is, as was mentioned by the context, and here, Minister, you said, you know, we grew up trying to guess when we were going to run out of fossil fuels. You didn't, you're too young, but we in our generation, we grew up saying, when are we going to run out? And now it's pouring out of our ears, you know, and it's cheap, and it's available, and it's, you know, there are technological choices to make, but no longer choices of having to live without it. And at the same time, we're saying, how are we going to deal with a world with zero net emissions in the second half of the century in order to achieve the 2-degree maximum warming? Well, that is an enormous, enormous contradiction, and one we will have to solve in the next 2 generations at most in order to come up with a livable world and to discharge a very serious intergenerational responsibility. So, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, Mr. Villegas, dear Jose, thank you for convening us. Thank you for this invitation. The question of harnessing inclusive growth and dealing with the trade-offs that we are confronted with in the field of transportation, of achieving reliable, accessible transport infrastructure to facilitate trade, to provide access to skills, to jobs, to improve our well-being is absolutely critical. Jose suggested we need a new paradigm for transport policy. It's almost a cliche that we need a new paradigm. I studiously avoid the word paradigm, the word, I find it, but he said that we needed to move into a different set of solutions, because we have new challenges, because those challenges are confronting us today. And I'd say that economic and social inclusion, this question of the growing inequality, is a starting point, when the focuses on getting people to work, but literally getting people to work, physically getting people to work, but also being able to get people to work because they have a job. So let me say in ending that, of course, in the OECD we say that our motto is better policies for better lives. So I like to paraphrase ourselves and say here what we're talking about is better transport policies for better lives. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Secretary General. As one might have guessed from the OECD, a very broad context in which we base our discussions today. I want to welcome Minister Brownlee particularly. You have had quite a long journey to get here, sir. You're very, very welcome, and the floor is yours. Do you have a microphone? Here we go. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Looks
Oh, yes, I always look fresh. There's no doubt about that. Well, firstly, thank you for the opportunity to make a few comments here today. Can I acknowledge Mr. Calavier, President, and Mr. Vergas, our Secretary General, and you too, Mr. Portillo, for your convening this afternoon's events. Can I say a few things about New Zealand, but from the outset, say that in the context of our theme, connectivity, intelligent transport systems and transport reliance are the things I want to cover most. New Zealand is a very small country, and on the map that Jose put on the screen earlier, we're about as far to the east as you can get, just south of Australia, but in fact by air 3.5 hours away, and several days by ship. For us, we have always had to look to how we become more connected. New Zealand in the 1870s developed refrigerated shipping so that we could export our meat products off our farms to Great Britain. And we did that right through until the 1970s, when Britain became part of the EU, and our 80% export market was dropped to about 30% in the short period of just 3 years. So connecting to other markets was important for us and has been all the way through our history. The other aspect of this discussion today has been some of the talk about the sustainability of transport systems in a world where we have 7 million people, as Michael Portillo pointed out, growing to 9 billion very shortly, all wanting to travel more freely, all wanting to exchange goods more freely, and no real opportunity to deny that demand. So we do have some challenges, but I do believe it is in intelligent transport systems and reliance on technology and encouragement of that technology that some of that answer might lie. The shift that Jose pointed out before works very much in New Zealand's favour. Our markets have always been in the far west, and now as the economic powerhouse of the world is beginning its shift to the east, that is of some advantage to us. One of the interesting things, though, is that as those markets develop, more and more people in those countries are going to increase their personal wealth, and in countries that have large populations, that will mean greater pressure on transport systems. We are interested that at the moment there are around about 3 billion passenger movements through aircraft each year. By about 15 years' time, around 2030, that's expected to more than double. So if you think about what that means for our environment, what it means for our infrastructure, and what it means also for our regulation, it's a big question. New Zealand has taken the view that we need open skies, and so we operate an open skies policy. In my time as Minister, we've concluded around about a dozen additional open skies agreements with various countries. We'll be signing some more while we're here this week. But I do think the ICOA mandate that's been picked up to look at the MILAT, which is the multi-agreement on air transportation, international air transportation, is something that more countries should consider because it will allow us, if we strip away some of the restrictions and freedoms that were part of Air Services Agreement from the 1940s, that we'll be able to deal with some of those other issues on a country-to-country basis, but also internationally. Technology is something that has moved very dramatically in the last couple of years. And New Zealand is a country that is a technology taker. We don't have a car manufacturing industry. We don't manufacture any vehicles in New Zealand other than pleasure boats. And we do rely heavily on imported vehicles from all around the world. So if the world is going to move to intelligent transport systems, and I think it's important that we don't make the same mistakes that saw the argument between VHS and Betamax. Years before that, the argument between AC versus DC power supply. or in a modern context, get into a situation where just about every cell phone has a different charger, causing all sorts of havoc in the household. Having a constant language that intelligent transport systems can work with in an electronic sense, I think is a goal that we should all be pushing for. Just want to make a few comments about transport resilience. It's sort of a thing that's somewhat overlooked until you experience a disaster. New Zealand experienced a series of earthquakes beginning in 2010 that devastated the city that I live in. And to put it into some context, Hurricane Katrina in the United States cost that country about 1.4% of their GDP. The very big tsunami disaster in Japan cost them about 4% of their GDP. Our disaster cost us 20% of our GDP, and it will be some years in getting a recovery from that. But one of the lucky things for us was that as an island nation, we were able to rely on outside transport services to get in the goods that we needed quickly to make people's lives comfortable, and to get in the gear that we needed, the heavy equipment, to make a fast start on that recovery. So transport resilience, I think, is something that you can look at from a point of view of what happens if the bad day comes. But it should also be something we look at as being able to provide those sort of reliable services, those huge demands that are going to be there as the world's population grows, as the world's population becomes more individually wealthy and does need to take advantage of transport systems. I think this organisation with this theme and the comments that have been made so far augurs very well for the international community to make some very good decisions on each of those topics: connectivity, intelligent transport systems, and resilience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I suspect very few of us knew that the earthquake meant a 20% of GDP cost. That is quite staggering. And last contribution from our panelists before we get into a panel is from Jean-Marc, please. Have we got a microphone? Yes.
Mr. Minister, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very to this panel. I'm very honored to be as the representative of the operators among this prestigious panel. And since we are, one word about Transdev, we are a French company operating in 20 different countries on the 5 continents with 90,000 employees, and we are operating bus, coaches, tramways, metro trains, also ferries and airports under the trademark of Transdev and Veolia. And since we are a French company and the president of this forum is France, please allow me to switch to French to make my presentation. So, je voudrais vous donner notre vision.
Ladies and gentlemen, as I've said before, I'm a transport operator, and the question is, which challenges does the public transport sector face? We observe 2 trends that counteract each other. Public transport is confronted with a ever-increasing trend of individualization and a demand for personnel services. And then we have to consider the role of vehicles and their use. There is car sharing, for example, which is a new approach. And here, ownership structures change. Plus, there is an increasing sensitization for environmental questions and issues. Of course, public transport plays an important role here, but public transport alone cannot reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Next, there is an ever stronger digitalization in the transport and mobility sector, and of course, that changes services and offers. In emerging countries, on the contrary, we observe that cars still play an important role. So that means that it is a social achievement to own a car in certain regions. These are also figures that don't cease to rise. In emerging countries, there is an increasing number of vehicles. So you can see that there is a certain discrepancy between increasing personnel transport and increasing urbanization in emerging countries. So that means that there are until 2015, more than 1,000 cities with more than 20 million inhabitants. So transport will play an important role in these cities, and it will create a situation that will have an effect on economic growth. That means that the countries in question need a strong public transport system in order to develop economically. When it comes to transport societies in those two parts of the world, I can say that in the developing countries, the emerging countries require squaring the circle. So how can you get 20 million passengers from A to B every day? Because this is what passengers expect from us. They want services cut to their needs, and individual and intermodal transport enters the stage at this very point. Immediate connection is also a challenge. That means that passengers want to be informed immediately about any kinds of changes, delays, everything that can happen in their way. All this has to be included, and this leads us to the digital issue. We have to take this idea on board in order to live up to the expectations of our passengers. We are trying to introduce or develop flexible rate systems by coming up with a kind of flat rate that we charge, and this flat rate includes environmental aspects and optimizations with a view on spending less money per trip. So what about the future of mobility? The future will be ever more complex in urban areas. The effects of that will be varied. There will be a variety of issues to consider with a view on the kind of mobility, and there are many points that are difficult to control. There is individual transport and common transport, car sharing, and other opportunities. Everything will be combined, and it has to complement each other. Then there are two kinds of hubs. This actually will be a profession of the future, meaning how can hubs be managed? This is important because that includes a whole series of services all around mobility. For example, a transport hub can be regarded not only as a train station, but also as a social or a life environment. So this transport hub has to be embedded, has to be integrated. And here rail operators have to come up with solutions just as any other transport providers. The Paris project, for example, considers the train station to be the center of the town with a variety of function. There will be virtual transport hubs, for example. That means that we will have communication platforms that can give real-time answers, tailored answers. And in doing so, we try to meet the expectations of our passengers. We try to offer different services all around mobility, and we try to cover everything. So that means that we try to develop tailored offers, a cab service after a train journey, for example, and we also cooperate with IBM on a global level in order to make intelligent mobility happen, smart mobility, in order to make mobility easier. And we also try to take a look at the future and to combine different modes of transport. That's as far as the developed part of the world goes. On to the emerging countries. Here, the future is connected to rail. That means between 2000 and 2010, there were global investments amounting to $39 billion per year. And in the next decade, these investments have not differed. So where do these investments take place? In emerging countries, above all the BRIC countries, for example, because this is where we see the steepest increase of investments into the rail system. There are many rail projects in the countries, the aforementioned countries, that require large investments, be it urban railway lines or regional networks or high-speed trains. There is a strong demand for them, and this strong demand will even continue. Public-private partnerships will be developed because, thanks to these models, it is possible to react technically and financially in a fast way in order to react to changing expectations. In Dubai, for example, in Mumbai in India, there will be a new metro line thanks to a public-private partnership initiative. So there were increasingly partnerships between international companies and local or national companies. They combine their know-how, they bundle it in this area. The Shenyang, China tram, for example, is another case. There were local partners that cooperated with us to come up with a bus system, and in Bogota, we also had local partners. So all in all, we can say that the transport operators work for their customers, the passengers. This is true for organization, and in this context, we cooperate a lot with authorities on national or regional levels, and our role consists of our adapting to the changing expectations, because our customers, our passengers, have certain needs and certain expectations, and we have to fulfill them in our daily work. Thank you.
Many thanks indeed. I'm sorry to say that we're going to have much less of an opportunity for a panel discussion than I would have hoped because of our schedule, and I hope to take the coffee break very shortly after 4 o'clock, and we have to have our award ceremony before that. But let me have a little bit of a panel discussion, and perhaps begin by asking Minister Dobrindt how digitalization is likely to change our mobility patterns.
Digitalization of transport, digitalization of mobility is a multi-pronged problem. We have high expectations. It has already been mentioned here. Gary has mentioned it, the resilience of transport systems mainly. We want to enhance through digitalization. We all have the expectation that our transport volume and the frequency of transport will increase dramatically in years to come. As far as cargo shipping is concerned, passenger traffic is concerned, all the forecasts will be far exceeded, I take it. What we can do in terms of investment, all that will not be sufficient to create a means of transport which will be able to cope with that growing volume in traffic. So we have to make sure that the present means of transport can cope with higher volumes. And here digitalization will help enormously, as it will be able to organize transport in a better way, make it safer and faster, will make it easier to hop from one means of transport to another. We have great hopes that we will be able to get speedy digitalization of our routes of transport, and that those systems can be applied well so that we can cope with a higher frequency in our transport systems. This is one aspect. A second aspect which comes into play is the issue of equity, of fairness, and of innovation. As we cannot have digitalization everywhere. In urban areas, there is a much higher degree of digitalization compared to rural areas. We have growing cities where investments in digitalization are economically viable. But we have large regions where this will not happen or will not happen with our support. We have to be careful. We have to make sure that the digital revolution happens everywhere. If we cannot make sure that this happens, this will lead to higher inequality and inequality between urban and rural areas. We have to make sure, as I said, that this is not going to happen, as mobility will not stop here. Mobility will not make a difference between urban areas and rural areas. There is some kind of right to mobility and the right to use that mobility. You've got a bracelet. My colleague has a bracelet where you can check your bodily functions, and you want to make sure that your body works well wherever you are, whether you are on a train or in a car. And here, if we cannot make sure that all our means of transport are digital, you will not be able to tell whether you are alive when you go by train. And this is what this bracelet is all about. But that was just in jest. So this is something which is far removed from reality. We bank on digitalization, but are not yet able to fit it in all means of transport, and that will lead to new inequalities. In Germany, we see this as a big challenge. So we have set up a program, a wide-ranging program, which is about digitalization, and we want to support digitalization, want to make sure that it happens by 2018. This is about digitalization of our roads, of our waterways, and of our railway systems. In a few days' time, I will have talks with our German railway company, and we will announce a digitalization campaign, making sure that we get digitalization faster into those means of transport than originally envisaged.
Your two responsibilities in the federal government together. And I think probably this may have to be the last question. I'm so sorry that the panel has had to be cut short. But Minister Cuvillier, a number of European Union countries have pursued competition in transport policy with more enthusiasm than France has. Is that a settled position for the French government, or is it something that's on the change? I mean, how do you view what's been going on, say in German railways? You need a microphone. There we go.
Merci. Tout d'abord, nous voyons par les
The different contributions have shown what the challenges are. We have said that we have to find a good situation for different kinds of transport. As far as maritime transport is concerned, there is some sort of gigantism. And also aviation and the roads. All those means of transport have to face up to different realities. The legality of territories, climate change. When we have a look at different regions, we cannot allow a situation that inequalities are created in our countries, so we have to account for those realities. What kind of question are you asking? This is a question for watchdogs and for regulating authorities. In France, We have a government which needs to be an organizer. It has to develop offers and prospects. We have 3 days now to look into those issues. Everything that has been mentioned, technological change, digitalization, to find answers for climate challenges. This morning I took part in a big aviation meeting, and we also saw that this was about different requirements and to find answers to our environmental challenges, so Airbus and so on and so forth. All that is about financing infrastructure. This is the most crucial question. It hasn't been mentioned yet. I know that Greece has the presidency at the moment of the EU, and we had a meeting the other day which was about financing infrastructure. The question is, how many startups do we need? How much investment do we need? Investment in intelligent transport networks? How can we change flows of information? How can we bring together users of infrastructure? Safety is key as well. Of course, we've got quite a number of good solutions. Investments in infrastructure hinge on other developments as well, to do with climate and the environment. Of course, we need a strategy. And this strategy should be a public one, a government strategy, but different players will have to have an active part in it. When we have a look at Germany, at the situation in Germany, it's about electrical cars. We talked a lot to Alexander Dobrin's predecessor. It would be necessary to create a uniform source of electricity, so the same kind of socket all over Europe, to be able to recharge your electric car. Those are things we have to organize, reliable and compatible networks. And here we have to have an influence as a government. And here we need a watchdog for that. Not everything can be done privately. And we have to invest more in infrastructure, more than PPPs would be able to do. Of course, there are certain ways of cooperation, PPPs, as I said, that is efficient, but we have to come to a balanced situation. And that gives us a regulating force. For that, we have a public challenge. We have to act in the public interest. This is a public service, and this is crucial for transport. So it's not just an economic question, a question of markets. About France, it is obvious what the answer is. We think that the market cannot always solve questions which are important for the public. Of course, we need competition, but we need competition which is in the public interest. I know quite a number of examples for that. We also need a regulating force, a watchdog, as I said. For instance, in maritime transport, we have experienced those examples recently, where we have seen that the market alone, that private players cannot solve those questions just on their own. So private logic does not always work and does not have all the answers. Striving for profit cannot be the alpha and omega of it all. So we should be open. Those who want to be innovative, those who want to invest, those who want to come to us, we want to invite them, and we are happy about them, and we do have that in France. So big corporations investing in France, the big democratic rendezvous which we have created in transport, that illustrates very well what is going on. Airbus is one example. This is what we can do in Europe and shows how determined we are to create an organization which is about satisfying the public interest. But we have to create a balance between the interests of different players. For that, we need a regulating force of a watchdog, and state organizations and authorities can take on that role.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid we have to come to the end of our panel discussion. I'm going to ask our panelists in a moment to take their seats back in the auditorium. But would you please give a round of applause, please, to our ministers, Brownlee, Cuvillier, Rate, and Dobrindt, Secretary General Viegas, and Mr. Janaillac. Thank you very much. Thank you. While I stand over here again, they're going to clear the chairs from the right of the stage. Let me just attempt some sort of summary of the discussion that we have just had. I think Ángel Gurría gave us a somewhat sobering reflection when he talked about the background to our present discussions, a situation in which we begin really a step back. Not only have we experienced a loss of economic growth, we've also experienced an increase in inequality, and I think crucially we've experienced a loss in trust. And although those remarks followed what Professor Galbraith had said, I think Professor Galbraith's remarks began to give us some idea of the solution. He talked very strongly about standards. I think those standards could be standards of behavior, what has been lacking very broadly in recent history. They could be about standards of ambition, ensuring that the ambitions we have are inclusive ambitions, not exclusive ambitions. And they also have something to do with standardization. In other words, making sure that in the transport field, we can apply solutions across borders. That is one of the things that leads to openness. And indeed, two of our panelists talked very strongly about openness. Minister Rate talked about the response in Canada to the changing balance of economic power in the world being to reinforce the Canadian instinct for free trade. So a confidence that in this changing world there'll be a role for Canada, meaning that new agreements have to be made with different parts of the country, but also with different parts of the world, but also making sure that safety, particularly in rail and ships, are reinforced as well. José Viegas, I think, began to give us some idea of specific things that are going to emerge from new technologies. I remind you, although I've already mentioned them, he talked about vehicle sharing, access, road safety, logistics, condition-aware vehicles, and a new social deal. And Minister Dobrindt, too, with his particular combination of responsibilities, said that he believed digitization was really about enabling present resources to cope better, to produce greater speed and greater safety. But he gave a warning, and I thought it was an interesting one, that digitization does not necessarily lead to greater equality. Digitization in itself can be the source of inequality. Minister Brownlee was picking up the idea also of openness, of open skies, and Minister Cuvillier, you've just heard, talked about the need to ensure that where there is competition, that doesn't lead to inequalities, the need therefore for watchdogs and regulation. And Jean-Marc gave us a very good warning about how traffic can be a major block to growth, and I think opened up the very interesting paradox for us of how mass transportation can become personalized. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is, as I say, unfortunately, the end of our panel discussion. The next thing to happen is that we are going to have the presentation of the International Transport Forum Awards 2014. And the first award this afternoon is going to be the 2014 Young Researcher of the Year Award. It is going to be introduced by Alexander Dobrindt, who needs no introduction. Welcome to the stage again, Minister.
Ja, herzlichen Dank, Michael. Ich freue mich sehr, dass ich
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm very pleased to present the Young Researchers Award of the ITF, and I am awarding it to a promising young scientist. As in the previous year, we had the same problem as every year. The quality of the proposals handed in were just astounding. 25 proposals from 17 countries trying to win the award, and the proposal that we give the award to today deals with price modeling concepts as a tool of controlling the traffic flow and hence congestion. The awardee comes from the George Mason University in Washington, D.C., and his name is Dr. Shanjiang Zhu. Dear Shanjiang Zhu, we congratulate you warmly to this award and to the work you've done. You have developed a method of analysis in order to compare traffic control measures in a better way, and in doing so, you have worked on a topic that the jury, in its innovation dimension, was convinced of. So I would like to congratulate you once again, Dr. Shanjiang Zhu, for this excellent work, and I would like to express my greatest respect for your work. You receive the Young Researchers Award of the ITF, and I wish you all the best at this point and hope that you will continue with your important work, your important research, and that you have a chance to go even deeper to the benefit of the transport situation. And as I've said at the beginning, this also makes a contribution to the creation of wealth. We wish you all the best, a lot of success, and a long, successful scientific career.
Welcome back, sir. And so now, will you welcome to the stage today's very worthy winner, Dr. Shanjiang Zhu.
Congratulations, eh?
Nice and close. Well done, Dr. Shanjiang Zhu. Thank you very much, Minister Dobrindt. Now it falls to you, José, to announce the next award, please.
So we now go to the Transport Awards, through which the International Transport Forum and its 54 member countries recognize innovative products, services, initiatives, or projects that either have already or have the potential to positively and significantly change transport industry. This year, for the first time, we're instituting two different types of prize. The Transport Achievement Award for things that are already in place and have demonstrated that capacity, and the Promising Transport Innovation Award, the things that look like they're going to do it, but it's still in the young phase. But we want to be able to distinguish those bright initiatives as early as minimally safe to do it. The Transport Achievement Award recognizes, as I just said, a demonstrated achievement of successful transport innovation improving quality, performance, accessibility, or intermodality of the transport offer. As the focus of this award is on the continual development of innovation, this initiative must not have been in operation for longer than 5 years. So it must be innovative, relatively new. And the Promising Transport Initiative Award is created to recognize innovation that has the potential to significantly improve. And so it must not have been in operation for more than 2 years. If we go now to the Transport Achievement Award, let me first thank my fellow jury members for their work in determining the winner. We had a tough time because we had such good proposals, really, and you will see by the results. And they are Sylvain Aon, Executive Director of the Police Network, Scott Belcher, the President and CEO of ITS America, David Bayliss, a trustee of the RAC Foundation, and Mary Crass, Head of Policy and Summit Preparation at ITF. And before announcing the award winner, it is my pleasure today, on behalf of the jury, to announce 2 runners-up. If the winner had not such an incredibly good proposal, each of these 2 could easily have deserved the merit, but we have just one prize. And they are ACI Europe for the Airport Carbon Accreditation Scheme and Transport for London for their Open Data initiative. And so I would like to congratulate these organizations for their project's achievements. The winner of the Transport Achievement Award was selected due to their significant achievement in improving urban transport system through the effective implementation of a road pricing scheme, and I would add to that, on a very thorough democratic procedure. So it is my pleasure to announce that the winner of 2014 Transport Achievement Award is the Municipality of Milano, Italy, for the Area C Urban Road Pricing Scheme. The jury was impressed with this application because after identifying that the initial congestion pricing scheme was no longer achieving its objectives, the organization had the foresight and the political courage to design a more effective replacement, the Area C Urban Road Pricing Scheme, and the capacity to implement this successfully, including going through a referendum. The jury applauded the successful engagement with the public and noted that this project provides an excellent example of bringing together the 2 dimensions of congestion and the environment. And to help me present this award, I would like to invite Dr. Enrico Finocchi, Director General for Road Transport and Intermodality at the Ministry of Infrastructure and Transport, Italy, to join me on stage. Enrico? Qui. Auguri. And I'd like now to invite Mr. Maurizio Baruffi, Chef de Cabinet of Major Pisapia of Milano, to join us on the stage to receive the award. Bravi, bravi, auguri, auguri.
Grazie.
Passiamo di là per la foto. Meglio qui. No, no, per me, questo è per lei. Grazie.
Congratulations.
Go on.
And your next award, please.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
And so for the Promising Transport Innovation Award, we had another jury. We don't want to overload our jury members. And also here, I want to thank them for the excellent work. The members were Maria Alfayate, a policy officer at the European Commission, Ruud van der Ploeg, Secretary General, European Metropolitan Transport Authorities Association, Susan Zielinski and Komal Anand from SMART at the University of Michigan, and again, Mary Crass, Head of Policy and Summit Preparation at the IDF. And again, before announcing the award winner, we have the pleasure to announce a special mention, in this case, to the Land Transport Authority of Singapore for their data mall data sharing initiative, which is introduced on their mytransport.sg platform. So another project on relation to big data, just like we had the one from London, and again done with great care, great quality. So on behalf of the jury, I'd like to congratulate Land Transport Authority of Singapore on this project's achievements. On the award itself, this year the jury had great difficulty and decided to recognize two winners, one on freight and one on passengers, because they were so good. And by choosing one over the other, we would have to be saying whether freight is more transport than passengers or vice versa. So we decided, let's go one each, because they're so good. And so let me start with the freight. The award goes to Holland Container Innovations from the Netherlands for their fourfold foldable containers. Let me just simply explain how it is. It's a container which looks like a normal container, but when it's empty, it folds onto itself, and 4 containers occupy the space of 1. This is a major, major boost in productivity for maritime transport by reducing the space empty containers take on the ships, but also on the land modes that feed into the ships. So it's really an amazing idea, very, very nicely put in place by a consortium of university and industry. So we were impressed with the significant potential offered by this foldable container for improving the efficiency. And to help me present the award, I'd like to invite Mr. Jan-Bert Dijkstra, Program Director of the Optimizing Use Program in the Netherlands, to join me on stage. Jan-Bert? Yep. And to receive the award, I'd welcome Mr. Simon Boschieter, CEO of Holland Container Innovations. Please join us on stage.
If you've been in the middle
Congratulations.
and handed over, that's great. Thank you.
That is for you. Bravo, huh? Good.
Congratulations.
And the second joint winner now on the passenger side is Xerox Services from the United States for their Merge Smart Parking solution. The jury was impressed with the capability introduced with this initiative, in particular with the achievement of dynamic pricing for parking. We also noted the potential of this initiative to evolve by providing additional information for users regarding alternative options for travel, which would offer significant additional benefits for passenger mobility. To help me present the award, I invite to join me on stage Ms. Susan Kurland, Assistant Secretary for Aviation and International Affairs from the U.S. Department of Transport. Susan? Hi. How are you? You too. Oops, sorry. And to receive the award, I welcome Mr. Richard Harris, Solution Director for International Transportation and Government from Xerox Services, to join us on the stage.